So I don't normally cover the development updates or the general news that EHG puts out, partially because there are already several content creators that do it, also because I cover it on my live streams. So I already have it pretty well covered on my part. YouTube content creators have covered on their part. There's not really a lot there for me to fill in. In this case, though, it's a little bit different because a few weeks ago I released a video on how Last Epoch could fail. And in that, I covered 8 areas that I felt if they didn't go ahead and do something about, fix it in some way, they could cause some sort of fail state for the game. EHG did respond on the video and said they're aware of these things. They're basically in agreement. But it looks like they've went a step further in this development update, at least from my perspective. It looks like they took that information and said, okay, this is stuff we need to communicate better with the community. And so we're going to put it in our development update in some form or fashion, covering most of those areas. So what this video is going to be is just what those areas are and what they said about them in the update. So there are 8 areas, and they are multiplayer, performance or optimization, balance, game balance, especially involving like your actual builds. So some are like way OP and some are really bad. The trade system that they had put out, which was, well, let's just say it wasn't especially well received in how they presented it to begin with. Getting ahead of the other big games in the genre, Diablo 4, PoE 2, not launching after those and giving yourself sort of no room to move. The mapping feel, how boring it is, and the combat feel, and seasons as well. We won't cover seasons in this one. They're too far from seasons to actually give us any real information on that. So we won't worry about that, but pretty much everywhere else on here, they've said something that you can glean that meant some area of that. So we'll start from the first one and go from there. Multiplayer is something that they talk about often. So it's not really an area where we had a dearth of information. And they talk about it here, but it's not really anything super new because, again, they do monthly multiplayer updates. So we're pretty well engaged as far as their multiplayer position, but they say in addition to the new content, behind the scenes, our development cycle has a massive focus on multiplayer. We have more dedicated developers devoted to multiplayer this year than at any time in Last Epoch's history, and we are actively paving the way towards our first community test. Again, the only new information there is like there are more developers dedicated to it than before, but we already knew they were focused on it. We knew they were trying to get to the first community test, so this isn't anything new or special, but it's good to see they're still talking about it. I do believe they're going to get multiplayer at least mostly right because they really have focused on it so hard. So of the things I listed, this is like the biggest one to nail, but also one of the ones I'm not super concerned about going forward because I do think they're focusing so well on it and they say all the right things about avoiding the pitfalls some of the other games have had, like Wilson. Okay, as far as performance though, this is something they haven't talked about too much. And I did say in the video that it was a worry for me because they haven't shown much as far as effort to fix the biggest problems. So they do talk about this twice in here. They say we're also putting a lot of effort into improving our tools to find, track, and fix performance issues. So I don't know much about the tools, of course. I'm not a programmer. I don't know what that would look like. But if their tools are better at finding performance issues, then theoretically, they should be doing a better job of optimization in the future. They also say, right now our efforts need to be focused on overall game quality, higher performance standards, server load, balance, story presentation, and more to ensure we're on the right foot at 1.0 to give our community and Last Epoch the successful launch it deserves. This paragraph says a lot in the areas that I was worried about, but one of the things it says is higher performance standards. So they're showing that they are committed to improving the performance in the game, having a higher performance standard, quote unquote, and that's really good to see. Next up is balance, and they talk about it right in there. In fact, I think this is the only time they really mention it is. So they say what they're focused on, balance is in there. So that's good to see. Not surprising, like we knew they were going to have to focus on balance at some point. It looks like they're starting to take it pretty seriously. That's great to see. Yeah, excellent. Okay, next one's a big one, maybe the biggest one. So it's trade. And if we just type in Bazaar here, we'll see why it's so big. So, starting with this, we have removed the Bazaar from the card and added item trading in its place. If you're not familiar, the original focus of the trade system was going to be around the bazaar. It was going to be a system to where like you go into the bazaar area and there's random shops set up from other players. What players you can see is of no control of yours. It's just determined by the game. It sounded like there'd be no way to search for stuff, like a search bar or anything like that. It would just be you go into the shop and see what they have. It sounded super tedious and really hard to find what you wanted. And it got a lot of blowback for it. So it looks like they're removing that from their card completely. And they go into more detail here. The final system we want to discuss is the Bazaar. We spoke to our ideas regarding the Bazaar in the multiplayer FAQ in July of last year. Since then, we listened very carefully to all of the dialogue concerning trade and had a lot of conversations internally as a result. After a lot of discussion about the various challenges to our proposed direction, we no longer feel that the Bazaar is the best way to go about player trading in Last Epoch. While player trading will still be a part of the game, we're planning to take a different approach. We will be talking more about our reasoning here, as well as the future of trading in Last Epoch in a dedicated post in the coming months. So this is a bit of a mixed bag. Bazaar gone good, as far as it didn't seem like that system was going to fit the goals of the player base. It didn't seem like it was good for players who don't like trade. It didn't seem like it was good for players who do like trade. Everyone seemed to be dissatisfied with it in some way or another. So they're moving on from that. The problem is they're not telling us anything at all about what they're moving on to. So there's a whole lot of conspiracy theories right now in the community about where they're going to go. Some people are like, oh, they're just going to go like player to player trade, like Diablo 3. Others are they going to go Wild West, PoE, trade with anybody you want. I should say for Diablo 3, party trade, not player to player trade. Party trade, like you can only trade with people who are in the party at the time. PoE trade with anybody, anything you want. Just have to do it by means of going to that player and then making the trade. People are worried about both. If you like trade, Diablo 3 is definitely not cutting it for you. If you're not a real big fan of trade, or you don't like a lot of hoops to jump through for your trade system being tedious, then you don't like PoE system. So both of those are concerning to a large portion of the player base. My personal thoughts on it, I don't think they're going to do either of those. It would be so far from their philosophies on it that they've shared. Like, yeah, the Bazaar doesn't seem to fit everything that's needed, but I don't think that means they're going to go do a whole 180 and just completely get rid of all of the core concepts that they wanted for trade, like avoiding real money trading, avoiding having the actual item drops on the ground be meaningful. Like, that stuff is probably still going to be a core part of whatever they come up with. I'm personally rooting for an auction house, maybe with some sort of bind on account stuff. Like maybe some of the stuff in the game is bind on account, like maybe uniques are, but then you can trade exalteds. Something along those lines where there's a good balance between trading is meaningful, but it's not the only thing you care about because drops are just not worth it compared to just trading for what you want. So we'll have to see, though. We just don't know. They really didn't provide us with much of any information here at all, except that Bazaar is going away. Okay. Next up is getting ahead of the big two. And with this one, there's really only one thing we can glean from it. Where is it here? Yeah, okay. So they say, we now have a better understanding of what our focuses need to be for 1.0 to ensure Epoch is ready for a large audience and live operations development for years to come. Now, that doesn't say too much itself, but what they then did later in it kind of, to me, is meaningful. So in my video, I suggested, look, you got a forecast with all this kind of stuff on it. There was 2 endgame systems on here. There was a whole, they added a bunch of stuff. It's like, do you really need to finish all that by 1.0? Is it more meaningful to get like 5 endgame systems up by 1.0 than it is to just get it done before Diablo 4 and PoE 2 launch? It doesn't seem like it to me. It seems like the game's in a good state. You have these certain things that are definitely priorities, and you have these other things that are like, those would be nice to have, but would they really be nice to have if you're going to launch after D4? I don't think so. So it looks like they're in agreement on this, in some respect at least, that they're focusing their efforts and they're removing stuff they don't think is necessary by 1.0. And those things in particular are Epoch's Calling Gates Memoriam, which were 2 endgame systems. I was a little surprised that these were both removed because, you know, endgame's a big deal. And these were both on the Kickstarter, so they've been concepts that they've been talking about implementing for literally ever. But they're also probably some of the things that'd be most time consuming, and there's a lot of overlap, especially with Gates of Morium. Like, Gates of Morium is a system that was just gonna let you go back and play the campaign with like modifiers and stuff. A lot of people don't even like playing the campaign now, so it was kind of ambiguous whether this would even be a good system to have. And now the dungeon system is kind of playing a similar role, where it's like you can just, instead of doing the campaign, you can do the dungeon system, and then it's also replayable. So it makes sense this is gone. Epoch's Call is a little bit different because it was supposed to add randomized content to the Monolith and the Gates of Morium, which the game really needs. Like, really needs. And this is going back to another point we're going to talk about in a bit here, with the mapping being boring. Epoch's Call could have been one of the solutions for that, but it's getting removed. However, we'll talk about in the mapping section, there are reasons to think that at least they're well acquainted with the problem that mapping has right now. And so it's not, Epoch's Call going away does not mean that the concept of fixing the boringness of mapping is going away. Okay. Actually, that's the next section. We just did the getting ahead of the big two, cutting down on stuff. They're doing that. That's good. Boring mapping is the next one, so let's go right from that back into Epoch's Call. And in that, where they talk about getting rid of it, they also say, with that said, we are still dedicated to improving monolith randomization. These sorts of missions that direct players to specific pieces of content in endgame, which is what Epoch's Call was supposed to do, are still something we're considering implementing. However, if implemented, they're more likely to be a part of the favor system rather than Epoch's Call. So this suggests that the favor system, whatever that is, we have no idea. It was added like a patch ago into the forecast. Whatever that is has something to do with mapping randomization, which will hopefully make them more interesting, give you more reasons to explore the content, explore the map, not just run directly to the objective. So it's good to see that they are pointing out, yes, we want to improve monolith randomization, which we can rate as improve monolith mapping being boring and having nothing to go explore. We want to do that, and we're going to. It just might not be through Epoch's Call, or it won't be through Epoch's Call. It'll be through something else, maybe the favor system. Okay, the last one is combat feel, and this one, honestly, there's not a whole lot here. There's very little, but there is something, and that's nice to see. They have talked about combat feel a bit more lately, but it is in here as one of the priorities. Here we're talking about combat visual effects and feel being one of the things they're putting effort into, along with the performance issues right below it. So combat visual effects and feel is on their radar as well. So basically everything except for seasons, there's some sort of reference to it in the January development update, which is awesome. Like, that's really cool. And seasons didn't need to be in here because we're just too far from that. Like, it wouldn't have made sense to start talking about seasons now. So I definitely get that and agree. Don't need to talk about that now. Talk about all the stuff to get to 1.0, and they did. And I don't think there's anything in here that I can really disagree with, except I wish they would have said more on where they're looking for trade. It's probably the case. It's just not finalized yet. They don't have really solid plans for exactly what to do with it. They just know the bazaar is not it. And so letting us know it's removed to give us an idea that they're listening to what we're saying, and they recognize that we don't think the bazaar is the right system for that, and that they're moving to something else. I can't wait to find out what it is, though. I really hope they don't make us wait too long, because that is, of course, a big part of the game once we hit 1.0 and beyond. It's going to make a big impact on who plays the game and how much they enjoy it. Okay, that's it. Really cool stuff. Yeah, EHG's a great developer. Their community engagement is really second to none. It's great to see them turn around on this so quickly. And in the update, just address so many things from that video, just from the community in general, our concerns. As always, would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you to join me on the live streams. I do those 5 to 6 days a week. That's my primary content. Also have a Discord if you'd like to hang out there, or feel free to leave comments in the YouTube section below. And a shout out to my Patreon supporters. I apologize that I don't have up a list of my Patreon supporters yet, but I do want to thank you very much. You do definitely help me continue to make this content, which is what I love to do. All right, thank you once again. I hope you have a great time in Last Epoch, and I will see you all again real soon.